Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Erin Lageson, and I am the presiding judge of Department 3 of the Oregon Court of Appeals, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing your presentation this afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Jewett. I'm a county court judge in Orange County, Florida, and the Ninth Judicial Circuit, Orlando.
Good afternoon. My name is Doreen Hartwell, and I'm an attorney in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Students, you may introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Levi Peterson, and I'm a senior at Green River High School.
I'm Jessica Petrie, and I'm also a senior here at Green River High School.
My name is Jared Lesisco, and I too am also a senior at Green River High School as well.
Thank you. Well, we are doing question 1 today. A result of the decision in Wisconsin v. Yoder is that, quote, any parent/guardian can refuse to let their child go to school beyond the 8th grade or learn about a subject by saying it's against their religious beliefs, unquote. Do you agree or disagree with the result of this decision? Why or why not? What words, if any, are found in the U.S. Constitution or in state constitutions that protect the right to an education? And finally, how have courts balanced religious beliefs with other rights? You may begin.
In the storybook version of American history, the Puritans came to the United States aboard the Mayflower in search of religious freedom in 1620.
Many other religious groups soon followed it because they heard the claim of religious freedom in the new land.
No one religion was nationally recognized, and the country eventually was founded on the strong fundamental belief that the separation between church and state was intrinsic to a just government.
The very first amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that everybody in the United States has the right to practice his or her own religion or no religion at all.
Furthermore, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment prohibits the government from encouraging, promoting, or establishing religion in any way.
The Free Exercise Clause gives you the right to worship or not worship as you choose.
The Supreme Court further defined what actions would constitute a particular government act or an action being unconstitutional promoting religion in the case of Lemon v. Kurtzman in 1971.
The case produced 3 tests, known as the Lemon tests. To determine a policy must first have a non-religious intent, secondly, not result in promoting any set of religious beliefs, and lastly, it cannot overly involve the government with religion.
These laws would go to say that the decisions made in the court case West v. Yoder is constitutionally and morally correct.
We believe, however, that no action should be justified on religious beliefs whatsoever, as a lack of religious beliefs is just as valid of a moral argument against any action.
Sending a child to school after 8th grade is either necessary for all people and everybody has to do so, or it is not an absolute need. And anybody who wishes for an exemption should be granted one despite any religious affiliation.
In summary, religion is a choice.
Nearly every country's constitution includes the word education itself, and furthers this by outlining what an education means and what all an education will entail legally. However, one country doesn't.
And that's the United States.
The words in the U.S. Constitution are sometimes interpreted to allow a right to an education, but in reality, they only initiate a right to equality.
More specifically, the 14th Amendment requires that all kids be given equal opportunity, no matter their race, ethnic background, religion, or sex, whether they're rich or poor, citizen or non-citizen of the United States.
The key thing to note is that the Constitution does not mandate any form of education. It just requires the opportunity. This means allowing people to choose not to have an education is well within their right.
In theory, courts have balanced education and religious rights simply.
Nobody is forced to do either activity, and taking part in one does not mandate taking part in the other.
In practice, there is also truly no mandated customary education.
Oregon tried to require attendance in public schools in 1922, but that decision was quickly shot down by the Supreme Court in favor of allowing private and home education. Children are required to attend in school until the 8th grade, but what really is school?
Any family is entitled to the right to homeschool their children, which basically gives them the ability to not school them whatsoever if they want to.
In fact, in 11 states, a person homeschooling their child has no legal parameters and no accountability measures are taken to ensure the child is being educated in any fashion.
Furthermore, education as an idea is undefined, especially in a legal context.
The law does not dictate what type of education a child must receive to be considered an education outside of public school.
A person could, for example, only teach a child how to weld, and this, while not following the guidelines of Common Core curriculum in public schools, still could be considered a form of education.
The right to an education is not being denied in the circumstance, even though the child may grow up never learning to read, write, or do math. But there is no constitutional or federal legal requirement that people do or must learn these things.
Even if there were, a person can always claim that they're not capable of learning said skill, which the government can't discriminate against them for a lack of capability.
This creates a legal loophole and ensures further that there is no true guarantee to an education. Only educational opportunity that a parent can choose to or to not take advantage of.
Parents can choose to educate their child in a controversial manner or not in any basis, but not.
Oh, we have reached time, I believe. But we'll proceed to the questions.
I think it's me. So for what I hear you saying is we should have federal standards or a constitutional right to education because it's just a free-for-all right now. And if the person has the right to homeschool, which there's no protection, it could just be no school. I mean, it sounded kind of bleak, unless I heard it wrong. But I mean, what I heard was the way it is now, where the freedom is there, there's no standards a parent can do or do anything or do nothing. So shouldn't that mean that we should mandate or make it a constitutional right?
So I would say that this is a massive problem that we have no ability to regulate what we're educating these children in. If this was a massive problem in the United States, if our literacy rate was lower than it is, and if we didn't have this culture around an educated public, and yes, we do see those individuals or like radical institutions or individuals that want to educate their children in a manner that no regular citizen would educate their children. But I think we do stand behind the idea that that should be a right of an individual to their children.
Furthermore, the idea of this that we're getting at is that the religious freedom shouldn't be the reason that there's an exemption. It should be on the basis of it's either a liberty you do have or one that you don't have. It shouldn't have to be justified based on what your religion says. It should be based on what your moral compass says. So the right to pick what a child's education is currently based on that and should remain that way.
Okay.
So based on, I guess, sort of a follow-up to what you're saying, can you explain or how you would describe or the importance of separation of church and state to the extent that we're talking about education?
Yeah, so essentially what we don't like about the separation between church and state in this kind of context is that we don't think that church should have this kind of special exemption, that you should be able to not learn about evolution because you're religious. It should just be you should be able to opt out of any kind of educational program simply because that is like what you, that is the decision that the parent has made. It shouldn't be a basis in some established religion or have anything to do with religion at all. It should just be the choice of the parent to make those decisions. We think that religion should be even furthered from the state's decisions by not having those be the requirements to deny the access to the education from the parent's perspective.
True religious freedom in this type of context would mean that any decision could be made whether religion was involved or not. If we had real religious freedom, then it wouldn't matter what religion you were following and what decisions that religion says. It would just solely be based on your own moral compass.
So with regards to, I guess, looking at religious, so are you saying that to the extent that we have the right to religious freedom, that right should basically just be absolute?
Well, at least in the context of our education systems right now, and what we were looking at in the Unit 5, the quote that we were given was an 8th grader or learn a subject saying it's against their religious beliefs. So the paper was saying like people could opt out of stuff exclusively for those religious beliefs in an educational program. And what we think is that you should be able to opt out, not just because you have a religious exemption, but just because an individual might have some other excuse. It shouldn't have to be based in a religious exemption.
Yeah, and then we furthered that by saying that the idea of opting out of a subject based on education, that education isn't truly defined, and we shouldn't tell someone, in order to be educated, you have to know this. So it should be based on the individual's opinion of what that means, as it isn't defined nationally. So we should allow that to be open for interpretation, not pursue and say, this is the way it should be, and this is the dominant culture.
To add on what they have said, that we believe that parents should choose to educate their children in a conventional manner, or not on any basis, not only on religious reasons.
And can you give an example or point to a constitutional reference with regards to like what right would be enforced by allowing parents absolute right to decide whatever they want for their kids? Is there something that you're relying on?
Well, in this, we essentially only focused on the educational aspect of what the state has the right to choose to teach the children.
So what we're referencing is that the First Amendment of the Constitution gives us the freedom to express our religion how we want, and that should therefore also mean lack of religion. And then we further by saying that education isn't in the Constitution. So all they're entitled to is the ability to express and equality. So if you're entitled to express equally, you have to be entitled whether you have a religion or not.
So one of the things that you covered in your prepared remarks is how difficult it is.
Aaron,
I didn't get that.
We lost.
Could you try again?
I'm lost.
I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
All right. So one of the things you covered in your prepared remarks is that it's very difficult to give content to the meaning education. What is an education? Based on that difficulty, which of the three branches of government do you think is best equipped to implement a right to education?
We're saying that that should be open to interpretation of the individual, what they deem education to be. Because if it were to have a national standard, we'd be perpetuating one culture saying that this is the way that kids must be educated. And we gave the example of, for example, someone learning how to weld, learning a trade would be an education in that person's perspective in their culture. We shouldn't infiltrate the idea that you have to know this in order to be educated. So it should be open to interpretation. And we believe that that's actually protected by the Constitution, that you should be able to interpret education how you want. As it's not directly defined, you have a right to equality and a right to religious interpretation.
And I'll just push back a little bit on that. If you're rejected the premise of my question, but the question was, given how hard it is to define content of education, which branch of government would be best equipped if we called upon a branch of government to define it, to give content to what it should look like?
We just kind of simply believe that there shouldn't be there is a Department of Education that can make the standards for what education can be. But if we don't think that there should be, in general, a federal standard of what an educated person is or what an educated person knows. But I do think like local governments, and we often see states like, this state is going to start teaching this subject, which is once again, just an opportunity, but something that can be opted out of.
But I would say that if there were to be a branch of the government that would handle education, it would be the legislative branch, because it covers the entire country. There's the representation from each of the states in the legislative branch. So they would be best equipped for their own states, instead of just maybe the executive branch doing everything, or the judicial branch doing everything.
Time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I can start by giving the feedback.
Yes.
That was a very by far you're taking the most original position that we've heard. I suspect that you're aware of that. So it's hard to fully think it through in the course of 10 or 12 minutes. I think that it's I guess it mainly just leaves me with more questions. I found it very intriguing to think about how you are trying to sort of work around religion playing sort of any role in the decision making by having a blanket rule that doesn't consider religious beliefs in terms of exemptions from school and I honestly haven't thought enough about it to know that it will work, but it's going to leave me thinking quite a bit. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I know who runs the Libertarian Club in the Green River High School. No doubt about that. This is a very libertarian argument. It's like, well, you know, there shouldn't be standards for education. It's whatever you guys want to teach your kids. You know, 10th Amendment be damned that it's left to the states, and the states can do that. But I have to say, it is novel. We haven't heard, you know, anything that's this way, and you're sold. You're double down, and you don't back down, which I really appreciate. You know, it's easy to take a position, and then as soon as you get a little pushback, to go, well, okay, you're right. We got none of that here today. Let's see. There was something else that I wanted to say. I'll let Doreen go, and then if I can remember what it was.
Yeah, I thought that most definitely it was a unique approach and view to the question with regards to your prepared remarks. You made it clear from the beginning, it's all or nothing, you know, and based on the Constitution not expressly setting forth a right to education, and the 14th Amendment only saying a right to equality, you kind of stuck to your guns, and pretty much you answered all of the responses consistent with that position. I thought that it was definitely a unique approach, and I did appreciate my co-judge's question with regards to, well, which legislative branch, you know, should define education if you know you had to choose it, and that she kind of made you answer that question, you know, like it was, whose job is it and who should decide, and I think it was, actually I can't see your name because at the bottom it's covered. Brad Cox is I can see Lex, the first, yes. And so it was great that the legislative branch is best equipped to define education, and I was happy to hear you respond with an answer to the judge's question. But by the same token, it's like you guys are clear, you know, this is your position, all or nothing, and so way to stick to your guns. And I said you were consistent, so good job.
I will jump in. I think you're also one of the only groups that have discussed how difficult it is to define what it means to be a right to education. And I think that is a hugely important discussion, because that's been sort of one of the hangups in terms of, should we recognize it, put in the Constitution? Whenever it ends up in court, nobody really knows how to put it into play. And the reasons for that are exactly what you've articulated. And so that was a very important insight on your part.
Alrighty. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Good luck, guys.
Have a good night.
Bye.